Now, we are joined by Humphrey. Do we say Ker or car?
It's car.
Yeah, it's a proper car.
Yes,
yeah,
which is quite an Irish thing.
Well, it is, because I have friends called the Kers, but there's another or
With an extra R, yes.
or whatever way you say.
Well, my dad's from County Down. So
is he really?
He's an Irishman. So.
That explains everything. So
Yes.
here we are. Two guys slugging it out at the top of the tower. You are executive director at Rexam AFC and so many other things besides. But what I want to do is, before we kick off into, because we can go to, we should talk a little bit about history, given that you're a buff and movies and everything else. But the Wrexham story is, in one ways, a sports story, and in another way, and this is the way I'd love to talk to you about it as well, it's a human, this lovely human, emotional, societal, kind adventure. Can you, for the uninitiated, give us the sort of the blurb, if you would, and we'll take it from wherever.
Welcome to Wrexham is a documentary about the fortunes of Rexam AFC, a football club in North Wales. We're 159 years old, and it's a club that has been at the absolute beating heart of the town and the community, and really the sort of the wider area of North Wales during that period. But it's a team that's gone through this very difficult period over the last 20 years, up until 2021, when it was purchased by Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds, two Hollywood fancy dans, who came
superstars, really.
Superstars, who came in and injected, money, but also sort of belief and excitement back into the football club. And the documentary charts how what the ripple effect that has been throughout the community. So there's a lot of football, but there's an awful lot more, I think, kind of humanity, really. Yeah. And that's the bit that I'm in the documentary, spoiler alert. This may be a turn off for some of your listeners now. But the bits that I enjoy are seeing the fans and the people in the town and our players and the reality of what their lives are like.
Because it strikes me, if to use an analogy, is you kind of brought Oz to Kansas.
Yes, right.
Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
I mean, it had been an Oz kind of place anyway. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, like so many mining towns, and people will know who live in towns around villages and counties and countries, whether it's Ireland or England, when they go, so much goes with them, and including morale and soul. Yeah,
well, Wrexham was a kind of a prosperous, mid-sized market town with a big coal mining community around it. Had a big steel milling industry there and brewing, and all that kind of went away across the course of the 80s and 90s.
Savage, really.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's a perfect snapshot of what was happening across the UK. In many respects. That kind of transition out into this kind of post-industrial. We're now in this kind of fintech weird, like what I don't know what the UK is supposed to be these days. It doesn't seem to know.
The globalized world is a confused one.
Certainly. Yeah. And Wrexham suffered and never really got much of a helping hand from UK government. I think there's much debate in Wales about North Walians feel like South Wales gets all the attention from the Welsh government, albeit the Welsh government's been great to us and as has the local council. But it just was a place where they had this thing that they loved and it was kind of dying in front of their eyes. And then these two sort of fairy godfathers flew in and were like, oh, we're gonna take this thing and regenerate it and rejuvenate it, and it's had this extraordinary effect on the whole area.
The feel good factor, isn't that why people watch it?
Yes.
You're here to talk about season 3. I mean, who knew? And let's go back to that kernel, the origin story. And which brings you, Humphrey, centre stage. Don't be humble. The trumpet is there for good reasons. So
sure.
So let's hear how you were a keystone to this structure. Talk to me about that.
Yes. So I was working as a writer on Rob McElhenney's excellent Apple TV show, Apple Plus TV show, Mythic Quest. I recommend it to anyone who's not seen that as well. As a writer, and I've always been a huge football fan. And at the start of lockdown, Rob, who for a long time had teased me about liking football, he's very American about it, and like, there's not enough points, and they're not called points. That's fine. There's not enough points, and they flop all the time, and everyone passes sideways and all this kind of thing. Eventually, we went into lockdown. I was like, look, you keep making fun of me for this. You should watch this documentary, Sunderland Till I Die. This will explain to you the nature of the relationship between British people, and it's the same for Europeans and people all over the world, with their football clubs. It is a tribal, religious thing. It can be toxic in some ways, but in many other ways, it's this huge part of what binds us together in a sort of social contract.
It's visceral.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's a thing where in the society we live in now, we are so much more disconnected from each other. We don't go to church anymore. We don't gather on the village green. We don't do, there isn't that sense of, if you live in a big city, very often you don't know your neighbours. You pass each other in the corridor, you might grunt at them, and that's about it. And football clubs are places where people can come together and have this sense of we all want the same thing to happen. They're very magical places, I find. I mean, the first time I went into Anfield, Liverpool's stadium, I remember being like, oh, this throbbing sensation is the closest I felt to like magic, the crackle of magic in the air when I read many fantasy books, as I am trying to do. And my job, yes, so I said to Rob, you should watch this thing. He watched it, he came back, and you always want someone to enjoy a recommendation you've given them.
Yes.
And he's like, I loved it, I cried, I laughed, I jumped out of my seat, I did everything. We should do this, we should buy a football team. And I was like, oh gosh, that was a very unexpected side effect of a reco. Normally you just get one back. Have you watched, The Fall? It's really good. So I was given the task, what football team should we buy? How should we do this? And, I started off thinking, this is a bit of, idle chit-chat. We're all in lockdown. Some people are making sourdough bread. I'm drawing up a list of football clubs. And then, the following day he was like, okay, I've spoken to this big broking firm that do this. They did the deal when FSG bought Liverpool and they sold Bordeaux to this guy and they did Paris Saint-Germain to them. Who are we buying? And so I created this list and list of clubs, and I scored them out of 10 in various categories.
Did you think you were playing a parlour game? I mean, did you?
A little bit. I mean, I truly was like, well, this is fun. I'm stuck in the house. Like,
what else would you do?
I'm either going to play Red Dead Redemption 2 for another 5 hours.
Or Rob McElhenney wants to buy a club.
Wants a football club, I'll suggest one to him. And, Wrexham came out on top of the scores.
Wow, okay.
For a whole variety of reasons. And, then very shortly thereafter, he was like, oh, I've spoken to Ryan Reynolds and he wants to come and be part of it. It was like, okay.
Yeah. So to remind people, obviously, Rob McElhenney, probably most famous for
It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
And Ryan Reynolds, most recently Deadpool. So now you're dealing with these guys that you're going, okay, well, that took a swerve.
Yes, completely. Yeah. And you realise as soon as, I think with Rob, we could have absolutely done it and done, achieved success that consummate with what we've achieved so far. But Ryan coming on board obviously changes everything because he's one of the most famous men in the world. And that means that suddenly people are queuing up to do business with us. Yeah. People want to do, the documentary was already sold before Ryan came on board. But once he did, you realise, right, okay, well, the opportunity for sponsors for the football club, the eyeballs that are going to come on the documentary is just vastly greater. So
if Ryan was, let's imagine it's a cabinet in your team,
sure,
and Ryan is the Prime Minister, for example, and Rob is the Chancellor of the Exchequer or whatever. What are you? And
first I would say they're both Prime Ministers because
they're co-regents.
Yes.
So they're two consuls in the age of Imperial Rome.
Oh, here we go, Ryan. Let's get into it. Okay, yes. Let's do it on the Roman system.
Okay, let's do it on the Roman system. So if they're the consuls, and this is the Republic, of course, so there's no emperors here. So there's two consuls. We're really nerding out, right?
Yes, this is a million people just switched off the radio as soon as we started talking about consoles.
But another 2 million nerds are going,
signed in. Yes.
What does that make you in that equation?
So I'm
tribute,
a quaestor or something like that. I can't remember what all the things are. Let's switch back to modern politics. They're the two prime ministers. I mean, I suppose I am. What am I for them? I'm perhaps foreign minister, home minister, something like that.
Okay.
I think foreign minister is a good one because I play quite a diplomatic role at Wrexham. A lot of what I'm doing is being their sort of representative on earth when they're not there. So we have proper, sensible, sophisticated people to do the running of the football club. Yeah. Yes, people that have been in the game for 20 odd years, who've worked every job you can have at a football club and work their way up to the top of that.
And I want to come back to you. What are you doing?
Well,
are you smoothing it all over?
I'm kissing a lot of babies and shaking a lot of hands. But I mean, I a lot of the time my job is to sort of, a huge part of the success of this operation is the Rob and Ryan of it all, and we are catering to our fans, but we're also catering to this new collection of fans who are coming in to see this weird and wonderful thing. And a lot of my role is to ensure that the fans that have been there before remain happy. And I go and I talk to fan groups, and I've become patron of Wrexham Miners Rescue, which is a the Wrexham Miners Project, sorry, it's changed name to that, which is this fantastic building in Wrexham that we're trying to restore. And, it's a way of Rob and Ryan to have a presence in the town when they can't be there.
Now, we are chatting away about the club, and you said something there as we were listening to Katie, that you have to do a lot of translation. And that's probably cultural as well as sporting and everything. And you said sometimes you have to translate football to Hollywood and Hollywood to football. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, I think, when the guys came, one of the reasons they wanted to be involved to start off with was that I was a huge football fan and a British person. And in that regard, had a bit of a head start on them in terms of what the culture of a football club might be and that relationship between club and fans. And, we are an extraordinary entity, but we have many of the same challenges that an Accrington Stanley or a Altrincham or whoever it may be will have, which is, fans want tickets, they want drinks and food, they want the team to do well, they want a lot of the same things irrespective of who the owners are. And so with Rob and Ryan, there were those instances of protecting that. People love their football clubs and they're very protective of them, and they were naturally quite suspicious of these guys when they first came along. So a big thing for me would be, it's such a little thing, and I hope to God they never hear this interview because they're like, why you bring that up again? But at the start they kept saying the Wrexham Red Dragons when they would refer to Wrexham. They'd be like, well, the Wrexham Red Dragons are this, that, the Wrexham Red Dragons are there, and I had to be like, oh lads, like, we don't do that here. It's one or the other, really. You don't say the Manchester United Red Devils or the Liverpool Reds or whatever.
You're foreign
the Toffees.
Yes,
a little bit. I was like, I understand why that's a natural inclination because you think of the Philadelphia Eagles, so it's weird to not have a thing on the end. But what I said to Rob is like, who's an Eagles fan, I said, it's like you're saying the Eagles' nickname is the Birds, go Birds. It's like you're saying the Philadelphia Eagles Birds when you say that. And he's like, oh right. Okay, and that was a very minor contribution, but they picked up very quickly, and they're very bright guys, and so now that side of it is actually much less prevalent for me because they have learnt so much and they've become so familiar with Wrexham.
They're speaking fluent Wrexham now.
They speak fluent Wrexham,
and you're the tutor.
Yes,
in this it's like Pygmalion with the ball, and it worked. It worked. Okay, I had nothing to do with that. I had my book here. We were chatting because, as I say, we're both history fans, and I was telling you about this book by Hampton Sides that I'm finishing now, The Wide Wide Sea. We talked about The Wager by David Gran, and you're au fait with all of that thing. And then you said, have you read
Patrick O'Brien's Master and Commander series?
And I haven't read one of them, but I watched the movie on Sunday, and you were saying you've read them, not once, all of them, but
amongst the nerds, of which I am one, they call it a circumnavigation. Is when you go through all the books. And I'm up to probably 4 or 5 times through all 19 of them.
Why?
Yeah. Well, because I love that. I think they are fantastic novels that transcend, traditional sort of historical naval fiction, where it's, the relationship between Jack and Stephen, the main characters, is one of the best relationships.
I'm going to get the first
fiction.
One today.
I think, the depiction of, the depiction of domestic life in that period is as good as anything in Jane Austen. It's just as funny and charming and intriguing and. They make me laugh. My poor wife, the amount of times I've been like, listen to this. And then she sits there and at the end gives me the gentlest, weakest smile. Like, yeah, that was great. That was really fun.
The sail was fluttering.
Yes.
When the sea was, oh God.
Yes. The you have debauched my sloth, which is one of the greatest lines in literature, when Jack gets Stephen's sloth that he picks up in Australia drunk.
Yes.
It's great fun.
What's the toast to wives and
sweethearts, may they never meet.
That's the one. Okay, I've really enjoyed chatting to you about all sorts of things. Season 3 of Welcome to Wrexham available from this Friday, 3rd of May on Disney Plus. What are you excited about people seeing in this season?
I would say so. One of the things that I've seen in the early episodes I've not seen all of them, is there's we've gone deeper behind the sort of curtain of the dressing room door, if that makes sense.
Great.
There's no curtain there, but some of the exchanges that you will see that are shot inside the dressing room at half times of games where we're struggling and, where you get to see these players who've enjoyed enormous success and people have watched them enjoy success after success are dealing with the realities of coming into a division where it's much harder and where what they had perhaps taken for granted or a level of performance that they were like, well, this will win us a game. They're having to realise, crumbs. I was about to say another naughtier word.
I got a rough idea. Yeah.
Believe me, if you don't like naughty words, you want to watch out because
but they're playing
as
we'd say in Ireland, senior hurling.
Yes. Yes, this is the big boys now. I mean, and there are plenty of big boys in the National League, but I think the big difference this season that we have just enjoyed as a football club, and you're about to watch on the documentary, is the season before in the National League, it's generally felt that the top 5-6 teams are pretty decent, and then everybody else is with the greatest love in the world not as good. There's a real divide, and in League Two, any of the 24 teams can beat any of the other 24 teams. Now statistically, the top 3 or 4 are going to beat more of the other teams on a more regular basis. But as we found out this season, we got turned over by teams that were right down the bottom of the table. We beat teams that were above us. Everybody. All bets are off. Yeah. So
sounds fair.
Yeah.
Sounds fair.
Seems like the right way to do it.
A bit more exciting for the fans.
Certainly.
Congratulations on it all. What a great story.
Thank you.
Your own involvement and the 2 lads that you mentioned, Rob McElhenney, of course, Ryan Rouse. But probably most importantly, and not to sound too whimsical about it, but the fans.
Yes.
What a great story and the people of Wrexham. It's just
absolutely.
It's joyful in a world gone mad. Humphrey Ker, what a pleasure it's been to see you. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Virgin Radio.